Have you ever listened to a person talk for less than a minute and known you weren't going to get along with that person? What did they say? Told me yet all women are bitches, you included. No offense. Within the first 2 minutes of knowing me. Parent of one of my kids' friends at school. Said there was a mouse in their house and his wife wanted him to kill it, but he didn't want to kill any creatures, he wants to make friends with them instead. But wife insisted, so he threw his shoe at it and eventually managed to hit it, but it wasn't dead, so he threw his shoe at it another 4 times. It still wasn't dead, so he poured boiling water over it to kill it. It still didn't die, so he poured boiling water over it again. It still wasn't dead, so he decided to leave it alone in the hopes that it would peacefully pass away. The logic of being too squeamish to kill something, and instead decide to torture it to death slowly in the most agonizingly painful way, absolutely blew my mind. Years ago, me and my ex-husband went to see a movie with an older colleague of his. Before the movie we had dinner at like a chain restaurant/steakhouse type place. Staff on the floor was all 20ish. I never met this man before, but in the first few minutes of sitting down and looking at the menu he very confidently told us how he came there a lot and flirted with the female staff because they love the attention. The best part? His daughter worked there. All I could think was how I would literally cringe myself through the floor if I was 20 and my 50-year-old dad came into my place of work and perved on my coworkers because he didn't understand that they only put up with him cause they are paid to do so. I was in a job interview once and the manager cut me off mid-sentence to jump to a weird conclusion. Him, what do you think the performance of this algorithm would be? Me, oh, it'll be n times. Him, oh, you think it's going to be n? You think it'll be n? That's ridiculous, there's no way it would just be n. Me, you gotta let me finish speaking. He then cut me off mid-sentence twice more during our conversation. We didn't get along. Dude was a total tool. There are different levels to being a psychic. I'm on the purple level so I can talk to the dead. Said a new employee at my previous job. Nope. They talk negatively about someone else in a very judgy way. There was this mom in my daughter's school who seemed to know everyone. She talked to me and she spoke so bad about these people. Then moments later I saw her interacting in a friendly way, with those she was judging. My eyes rolled so much I could see my brain telling me not to get involved with her. And I was right, because by the time school year ends, her friends hated her and they were talking behind her back too. I know I'm not supposed to ask, but I need to know. It's not for work or anything. What religion are you? HR manager. New guy at work. First coffee break he started complaining about his ex who had full custody of the kids for some unknowable reason and also how he'd like to slash her throat with a rusty knife. Nice to meet you too, don't think I'll be taking breaks with you. She showed up to a little get-together and the person who invited her said that they would be taking bets on who could sit with her for more than 30 minutes. $10 per person, winner kept the pot. I assumed they were just being rude and planned to tell her of her friend's plans as soon as she showed up. She walked in, looked at me and scoffed and asked if the grey car outside belonged to me. I said yes. She told me that with the money that car cost I could have bought something nicer. Okay, well whatever. I went to get a drink and sat to watch the crowd gather around her. I already didn't like her, but she went on to tell everyone about how she could never date someone who had a crappy credit score or couldn't pay their vehicles off after buying it. Someone who wanted to quit the contest asked for a cigarette. She opened up her purse and showed everyone a fresh pack of smokes and then told everyone why she doesn't smoke and why anyone who asks for a cigarette is either too broke to buy them or doesn't plan ahead of times. The guy asked her for one of her cigarettes. She said no and put them back in her purse. She talked about all the cars she bought. Basically her parents would co-sign for her and pay the car off to build her credit and she would give them a few thousand to pay them back. She was nuts and wouldn't stop talking. I disliked her but was also fascinated with her. She was super weird. Update. So I have gotten a few questions about this girl and that night. Also, who is Gina? There was something like 15 to 20 people there and most entered the contest. I think the pot got up to $100 to $120. The winner was just some guy who I didn't know. He spent the money getting everyone McDonald's and beer, so he was pretty cool. She was about 22 to 23, she had just finished getting her high school diploma because she had dropped out to make money according to her. I think she sold some milkshake things and fitness plans with some MLM. For those wondering what happened to her, I'm not 100% what happened to her. She wasn't my friend, but she did show up to a few parties I was at and she seemed calmer. She used to bring her own bottle of liquor and wouldn't share, which was kind of funny because on one occasion they caught her filling her bottle with a bottle of Jack that someone had brought and left on the kitchen counter, but she swore that all she drank was Hennessy and Fireball. I was listening to the Nexivm podcast and the clip of the founder saying he has 225 IQ. If I walked into a room and heard someone say that, I'd walk right back out. The quiet boy at school sat next to me and told me how hard he felt when he took a shit and how many times he ejaculated that way. I never sat next to him again. Some people might say I'm an asshole, but I just tell it how it is. 99% chance they are an asshole that I don't want to be around. Meet your teacher day before my kiddo started kindergarten, and this other parent literally bragged that her kid was completely illiterate, couldn't stand being read to, and she hated reading too. Was a customer at work. Naturally I wouldn't be friends. But even in a setting where we could become friends, it wasn't happening. I came up to her to see if she had any questions about our critters. I work in a pet shop, and the very first thing she asked was if parakeets could talk because she wanted to teach them racial slurs. Biggest nope of my life. New guy at work. Super fake by being overly excited and super overly comfortable with everyone in the first minute. He's all mommy this and pappy that to everyone and very overly touchy. We were almost all Hispanics there and everyone was uncomfortable. First phone call of the day, he hangs up cursing and taking it super personally that someone hung up on him, daily occurrence in customer service. After about 6 months, I put in my 2 weeks notice solely because I couldn't work next to or with him anymore. He would also get overly gossipy and personal. My boss rejected my notice and transferred him. He couldn't stand the guy either. No one could. What is a public figure or artist who has done horrible things but that people continue to follow or listen? David Eddings, and his wife Lee, authors who wrote several best-selling fantasy series. They're pretty niche compared to everything else in this post, but worth mentioning as they had a horrible child abuse conviction prior to writing books. Starting in the 80s they authored a few popular series of what would now be called YA fantasy, but prior to that they were both found guilty of severe physical abuse of their adopted son and had both their children. They'd also adopted a baby girl, separately, taken from them by the state. David actually wrote his first novel High Hunt while in prison. He had been a professor at a local college at the time of their arrest. Their child abuse was unconscionable. They kept a 4-year-old boy locked in the dark in an improvised cage under their basement stairs. His cage featured a crude bed with restraining straps, a toilet made out of a bucket, and tools used to harm him like a large needle and a paddle or strap that they beat him with. They were arrested, found guilty, and each served short prison terms. After prison David and Lee went on to write several best-selling series of fantasy novels, including the Belgariad, the Malloreon, the Elenium, the Dreamers, and the Tamuli. David died in 2009, and most of their fans don't seem to know anything about their history of child abuse. Not extremely well known I think, but Ethan Cath, aka Claudio Paolo Palmieri, from Crystal Castles. He abused Alice Glass physically, mentally, sexually, and financially for like a decade. Too bad he's an awful person. He's a very talented producer/musician. Let me just tell you that the weatherman from my hometown has more than a dozen aggravated assault charges from beating his wife and is still worshipped. I hate the man and all that he stands for. Gloria Trevi. I doubt any Americans will know her, but she's a Mexican singer who's been popular since the 90s. During the 90s she and her husband, Sergio Andrade, were the head of a sex/human trafficking ring of underage girls. Basically, she would groom young girls and promise them a career in music. However, once they accepted, she would basically kidnap them by kidnapping them and would force them to have sex with her clients and husband. Because the money and power she and her husband had, they were let go by the Mexicans' justice system. Her husband was indeed set guilty for rape, kidnapping, and sex trafficking but only sentenced to 1 year in jail. She, on the other hand, was never convicted to any charges or sentence. She is still very famous in Mexico and a lot of people, especially Gen X and older millennials, would still listen to her songs and go to her concerts. Even the media in Mexico would ignore all her past and rarely mentions that she was a leader of a sex trafficking ring. Edit. Oh wow, I wasn't expecting this comment to get updated so much. Thank you for the award and for adding very interesting info I didn't even know about this case. Some quick notes. 1. I am sorry for the grammar mistakes. English is not my first language and I tend to make these often. For all of those who were wondering what kipping mean, I was trying to say keeping. meaning that Gloria Trevi would not let the girls escape from one of her houses. Thank you for being patient with me on that. 2. Thank you so much for adding very interesting information I didn't know. For example, I wasn't unaware of her arrest and jail time in Brazil, the mysterious death of one of her kids, and the birth of one of her kids when she was in jail in Brazil. Boy George, falsely imprisoned a male escort by handcuffing him to a wall and beating him with a metal chain. Boy George drugged and handcuffed Audun Carlson to his radiator, battered and sexually assaulted him. He served a 4-month sentence and now he's on all sorts of reality shows and Noon seems to remember what a monster he is. In my opinion he should never be allowed on television or to realize music again. Jerry Lee Lewis was married 7 times, and a couple overlapped. The third marriage, at age 22, was to his first cousin once removed who was 13 at the time. She had a son at 14 that died in a pool accident at age 3. She divorced Jerry at age 19 for adultery and abuse, physical and mental. His fourth marriage ended, during a divorce, with his wife drowning in a pool, which I find suspicious. His fifth marriage ended with his wife having a drug overdose, and unproven allegations of abuse and a theory he may have killed her. Aside from drunk driving, tax evasion, and the one time Elvis had him arrested when Jerry crashed a car, drunk, into his gate waving a pistol, he also did some charming things like suing his own kids and accidentally shooting his bassist in the gut. Roman Polanski. I can't for the life of me understand why people still work with him. He has won Academy Awards that he couldn't accept in person because he can't enter the US. You know, because he drugged and raped a teenager. Anyone in the Church of Scientology. She's no longer alive, but Coco Chanel is still seen by many as a cultural and fashion icon, but my gosh was she a nasty piece of work. During her life she sold her failing business to the Jewish Wertheimer family, who built it into a successful and profitable perfume house. She then turned them into the Nazis and had their assets seized and transferred back to her as a pure Aryan, achieving sole ownership of the company. She worked with and for Nazi intelligence throughout World War II and had a hand in several anti-Jewish and other intelligence operations. When the Nazis fell, she gave free perfume to GIs to bribe her way out of immediate incarceration, fleeing to Switzerland. She ultimately escaped punishment after the war as Winston Churchill directly intervened on her behalf. This was allegedly due to blackmail, as she had knowledge about high-level politicians/members of the royal family and their close Nazi connections that would have been disastrous were it be made public. She died an old and very rich lady revered by many, with the full details of her horrible past only really coming to light after she died. Edit. People have pointed out that the Wertheimers managed to cleverly stop her gaining full control during the war and had their ownership returned afterwards. Thanks for the correction, folks. I hear Bill Cosby is planning a comedy tour for next year hoping for a complete boycott. The Duggar family. Salman Khan. Not the Academy guy but the Indian actor. He has connections with Underworld. He was known to be abusive to all his GF. He drunk drove a Range Rover over a bunch of pedestrian and then used his influence to make all the witness lie that it was his driver who did it. He killed an endangered deer and then tried his best to threaten the local community to withdraw the complaint. His movies are all crap but he has a huge fanatic following. Edit. When his GF Aishwarya Rai broke up due to his abusive nature he went to her sets and started destroying. The producer decided to drop her from the movie then deal with him. Aishwarya then dated an upcoming star called Vivek Oberoi. Salman using his underworld connections destroyed all his chances in the industry and Vivek who was once touted to be the next superstar ended up doing small roles in South Indian movies and web series. He tried to destroy a young singer's career because he didn't bow to him when he arrived. Also despite being in 50s he mostly pairs himself with barely legal female stars. Most of those who sprang to mind have been mentioned, but how about Prosperity Church Creedence/Faith Healing con artists like Joel Osteen or Peter Popoff? I cannot believe that they have followers still, it's unfathomable. Edit. Wow, this blew up. I wanna say that I just finished reading all the responses, and thank people for mentioning other examples like Kenneth Copeland, Benny Hinn, John Hagee, Jimmy Swaggart, Ted Haggard, Brian Tamaki, Creflo Dollar, the family of Oral Roberts, and their counterparts in other places in the world such as Africa, etc., and say that I'm very sorry for those of you in the comments that had to deal with family members and friends falling victim to these leeches in human skin. Who is the most overrated musician? As a Nickelback fan, I have nothing to worry about reading this. The cover band guy my college girlfriend cheated on me with. Apparently people really don't like Drake. Underscore thank God no one is trashing my faves underscore. The Kacker siblings. Sorts by controversial. This post has morphed from overrated musician into who do you dislike regardless of their music. Luke Bryan. Sounds like a third grader wrote all of his lyrics. Who is the most overrated musician and why is it Drake? I scrolled so far and didn't see Adam Levine, he is such a fucking tool. Literally made one good album, Emo, with Maroon 5. Songs about Jane was fantastic, but I can't escape his suckage. His very existence is just irritating. DJ Khaled. MGK. This is the most Reddit thread ever. Time for Reddit's daily I don't like Beyonce and Drake post. Mozart. He did nothing since 1791.